Welcome back. So a 32-team video with a Halloween theme to it because today's Friday the 13th. It's a Friday the 13th in October, which a calendar would tell you would probably happen every 7 years, right? So roughly every 7 years you got, leap years and all this in there as well. So what I've got on the board here is various horror movies. And I'm like, okay, so which horror movies would work the best for me to describe where a team would potentially see themselves based on maybe reputation, recent history, and all that. So we've got Friday the 13th and Halloween. Would your team end up in a slasher movie? About a nightmare movie. It's because Nightmare on Elm Street is about nightmares. Because if you don't know that, then it's not Sweet Dreams on Elm Street. That would have been a terrible name. These aren't Sweet Dreams. Happy Death Day, because Happy Death Day is basically it's Groundhog Day, just with a horror side to it, which meant I absolutely loved it. And the second one. The second one I think is actually a little bit better than the first one, although it's more of a sci-fi than a horror. Let's get out of that geekdom for a second. The Exorcist in Need of an Exorcism. Jaws is pretty self-explanatory. That's why I've got self-explanatory there. An Army of Darkness. All things Ash. I had to come up with one where I thought, there's got to be one for a team that just kind of has fun, goes out there, kicks some tail, and wins, right? Not every team necessarily is going to be fitting into one of the other categories, so I had to come up with one where it's kind of got a happy ending. Kind of. If you've watched Army of Darkness, you know it's not a complete happy ending. And the original ending of that, of course, was not a happy ending at all, although it was a very Ash ending, wasn't it? Glad that's not canon, or else we don't get Ash versus Evil Dead, which was a fantastic, almost perfect series. So we're going to start off with the Canadian teams. I'm going to start off with the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets, if I had to pick one that I think they'd end up in, I'll go with the Friday the 13th, the slasher movie. There may be sort of a final girl quality to them on some level. It's a small market team. It's a team that hasn't won a Stanley Cup to this stage in their existence. And so sure, Friday the 13th, which I think probably a lot of teams will end up with. For the Ottawa Senators, well, it's been a nightmare, hasn't it? It's been a nightmare since 2017. No Stanley Cup playoffs, and now the start of the season, there's all this uncertainty, and yeah, I think Nightmare on Elm Street's a good spot for them. All right, so Vancouver, to me, I'm going to put them under Happy Death Day because it does feel like there's a repeating quality when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks. And I'm hoping this is the year they get out of this, that maybe with that win over Edmonton, maybe it's a sign we won't have that slow start that we have every single year. So, yeah, I'll go with Happy Death Day for the Vancouver Canucks. Again, if you haven't seen that movie or its sequel, can't recommend it enough. For the Oilers, the Oilers, it's a little bit difficult to find one in here. And this is basically all your nightmare scenarios. Have they had enough setbacks for me to say nightmare? Nah, you know what? I'll go with the Friday the 13th. I do think that they're due for a breakthrough and potentially a Stanley Cup, but they haven't got there yet, so I can't really say there's been that happy ending to their season at this stage. For the Calgary Flames, the nightmare of having missed the playoffs again last year, and the up and down seasons continue. So I'll say nightmare. Every other year is kind of a nightmare for them, right? For Montreal, now rebuilding teams is difficult. Yeah, if they're rebuilding, just spoiler alert, I'm going to go with the Friday the 13th Halloween option. That, it's a slasher movie, and they're not... Slasher movies are interesting because there's varying degrees of seriousness with which they're portrayed. And then, of course, there's Terrifier, which isn't on the board because I don't know which team's going through that kind of a scenario. All right, that was a pause to let Bear out. So, yeah, Montreal, I'll put them under the slasher category. Toronto, The Exorcist. So we've talked about Toronto and they're not being able to get over the hump. And it feels like it's here more than anything else. And so, to me, yeah, you bring in a priest and you do some holy water and see if that'll make a difference. Tampa Bay. For Tampa Bay, I'm going to put them under the Army of Darkness category because while they haven't won the Stanley Cup in the last 2 years, they have been winners twice in the last decade, and they've been up near the top of the league or at the top of the league for quite some time. So I'm going with Army of Darkness. They just go out there, they kick some backside there and all that. But yeah, so Army of Darkness. I have to be really, really careful with language once I get into all the horror movies because there's a lot of lines that aren't exactly G-rated. So there's that. Carolina. So I'm going through the teams that are natural disasters, named after natural disasters. For Carolina, the way that last season ended, it's a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? Because they get to the conference final and then they get swept again. So a bit of a happy death day to it, but it's not repeating enough for me to say, yeah, that's happy death day. Colorado, also under the Army of Darkness category. Go out there and fight and win, and I mean, maybe you didn't say all the words, but anyways, yeah, the Avs. See, that's what I mean. There's certain lines I might pop into my head. I do like the horror movies, as evidenced by my Nightmare on Elm Street jersey from Geeky Jerseys. But yeah, Army of Darkness for Colorado, recent Stanley Cup champion. Sharks belong under Jaws. No, that's not why I put Jaws on the board. I don't know what you're talking about. So Seattle. Seattle's an interesting one. Not really a nightmare. So I'm going to have to put them under the slasher category, aren't I? Because there isn't a nightmare. There isn't anything repeating. They don't need an exorcism. They're not sharks. And they haven't broke through and won a Stanley Cup as of yet. For Minnesota, they belong under Happy Death Day. It's on repeat. First round upset, or first round knockout, I should say. They'd love to have that first round upset. They've been close. They've gotten to game 7s. They just have not been able to get over the hump. For Florida, well, they won they were the number 1 team in the league a couple years ago, and then this past season they go all the way to the Stanley Cup final, but they did not win that Stanley Cup final. So I'm going to put them under the Friday the 13th Halloween, some final girl there because they were in the finals. See, there you go. And yeah, I'll go with that. For the Coyotes, I'm voting them under Happy Death Day too. And I'm saying this because how many years have we talked about the Coyotes being in a rebuild? How many years have we talked about their arena? How many times have we talked about their market? It really feels like it's on repeat. It's the same. Like anytime I talk about the Coyotes, I know exactly what people are going to say in the comment section. Keep the team in Phoenix. Clearly Arizona's a great hockey market. Bettman's really smart. All those normal comments people make all the time. For Nashville, I'll go with Nightmare on Elm Street, in that it was a nightmare of a season's ending last year for them. The playoffs that nobody seemed to want to make it into between Winnipeg, Calgary, and Nashville. So down the stretch, things fell apart. And then in the offseason, moves are made that probably weaken Nashville, although they got the win last night, so we'll see. Boston. Boston. Yeah, nightmare ending of last year. That was an absolute nightmare for them last year. Best record in the history of the National Hockey League's regular season, and then in the playoffs, not so much. Vegas is down here. They're doing the "Give me some sugar, baby." All of the Ash phrases can work with the Vegas Golden Knights because they're the defending Stanley Cup champions. So that's probably the 3 that are going to end up with Army of Darkness. Probably won't be another. All right, so for Washington, bit of a Nightmare on Elm Street vibe here too, in that last year really fell apart for them, and they're looking to jump back into the playoffs this year and avoid the nightmares of injuries that they had from last year as well. Dallas, I'm going to put them under the slasher category too. Dallas is in a position where they could win a Stanley Cup this year. I don't feel like that things are as tough when you look at Dallas's recent seasons that they necessarily belong somewhere else. If there was a category of horror movie where I could say this is like losing in overtime all the time, then that might be where I could put Dallas based on recent history. For Detroit, bit of a Happy Death Day vibe to Detroit too, right? So last night they lose that game against New Jersey. It was close. But if Detroit gets off to a slow start, it's going to feel like last season, and it's been a while since Detroit was in the playoffs. So, yeah. For New Jersey, I had thought about putting something devil-related on the board just for New Jersey, but I didn't know a way to make it work. So, there's Devil's Advocate. There's almost it's horror movies. Devil's Advocate, I tell you, when Keanu Reeves threatens Al Pacino, I love a good laugh. I don't know that I've ever laughed as hard watching a movie as I did. I had to pause the movie because I was Keanu Reeves is threatening Al Pacino. Anyways, if you haven't seen it, good movie, but ridiculous in parts. But I'm going to put New Jersey under slasher because they're the Devils. And I almost thought, for Terrifier, Devils, sure, but yeah, Devils. It's not a dark name. Like the name itself has dark connotations, but if you know the story of the Jersey Devil, it doesn't really work with that at all. For the Flyers, I'll put them under the nightmare category. It's been rough. Danny Briere's making all the right moves right now, I think, and I think he's saying all the right things, and so things should get better for Philadelphia and their fans. But yeah, it's been a nightmare, hasn't it? And I would say the same for St. Louis. Since that Stanley Cup win, they've fallen off. Last year they missed the playoffs, and based on last night's game against Dallas, are they going to have issues with scoring again? Are they going to have issues with just being able to finish games? So St. Louis in the nightmare category. For the New York Islanders, it's tough to put them under the nightmare category. So I'm going to throw them under Friday the 13th here. I'm half tempted to put them under Army of Darkness based on them reaching the Final Four twice, but then I'd have to change the category of a bunch of other teams too. And you got a bunch of happy endings, and who wants that in horror movies? Well, not horror movies, that's for sure. So the New York Islanders, I looked up happy endings for horror movies, and I saw this list, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't have a happy ending. No, if you really pay attention to that movie, it does not have, like they said, Get Out has a happy ending. Does it though? So anyways, it does not. I mean, in some way, sure, but in the end, when you really think about it, probably not. The guy at the end of that movie, you really think the rest of his life was fantastic? Probably not. So yeah, the New York Islanders, I'm going to put them under the slasher category. Rangers, yep, I'm going to get lazy with Rangers too. I'm going to put them under the slasher category. Good team, probably due for a breakthrough at some point soon. They're seen as a contender by some and not as a contender by others. The LA Kings, yeah, same category. Because the LA Kings, good team, on their way up. Could they win another Stanley Cup? They absolutely can. Will they? That's a whole other discussion for another time. Pittsburgh, nightmare category for Pittsburgh based on last season. Right, so last season was rough. A lot of changes made by Kyle Dubas, and so we'll find out over the next couple of months whether or not they're going to work. Rough first game for Pittsburgh. Tonight they have their second, and so we'll get an idea for where they're at. Anaheim, they're on repeat, aren't they? So Anaheim's gone into their rebuild, but it does feel like it's been a while since Anaheim was really and truly competitive and in the hunt for a playoff spot. So would you be forgiven for waking up any day as a Ducks fan and thinking, this feels familiar, like I did this before? Yeah, it's very much repetitive. Chicago's interesting because there's a lot of people who don't like the Chicago Blackhawks organization, right? But Chicago as a team right now, that looks like they're getting better. Which probably will make those same people happy because they won the draft lottery and they get Bedard. But which category do they belong in? It's not Army of Darkness, even though they had the 3 Stanley Cups. I'm going up here. I'm going to chicken out and put them under Friday the 13th Halloween. And I put slasher because there are so many other slasher movies. There are a lot. If I could have found a way to have Tucker and Dale on this board, I would have too. Tucker and Dale versus Evil is a very good movie. Unless you're a kid, in which case, do not watch Tucker and Dale. Don't listen to me. I'm an old man. All right, Columbus. Well, Werenski got hurt last night, so I'm going to go ahead and put it under the nightmare category for Columbus. Last year was miserable. They want this year to be better. I hope they're right that this year will be better. But yeah, it's been misery for Columbus for a long time. Which reminds me, misery's one I thought about putting on the board, and then I thought, yeah, but who's had their ankles broken? Probably not a team. And then Buffalo, I'm going to put them under the Happy Death Day category too, because it's been on repeat since the 2011-2012 season. No playoffs. And Buffalo did not get off to a great start last night. So I'm sure there may be some Buffalo fans that at least in the back of their mind are thinking, they can't fail to live up to expectations now, can they? Can they? And then you think to yourself, well, they are the Sabres, so maybe. So at any rate, there you go. All 32 teams on the board. I chicken out a lot when it comes to this. But yeah, so this is whichever movie franchise I think this team would match up best with, whether it's a Friday the 13th / Halloween type slasher, Nightmare on Elm Street because nightmares, Happy Death Day because everything's on repeat, feels like one day's the same as the last. In need of an exorcism, to me, Toronto's the one. That's so if you're like, you probably put The Exorcist up there because Toronto, yeah, a little bit. Jaws, Sharks, because I was looking at horror movies like, well, I gotta have Jaws because Sharks, Jaws, and Army of Dark. Because hey, if you had the San Jose Sharks in a Jaws movie, I think people would watch it. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Plus, challenge for you: which horror movie do you think of horror movies that are out there best suit any of the teams on this board? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe or I'm going to be sad. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.